Hi, writers. Today we're going to talk about sandwiches and how we can use the CEW method to create effective paragraphs and develop them with source material as we share with our writers our own thoughts. Our objectives today are to understand why summary and short quotations are often more effective than block quotes in our writing, how to integrate small quotes into our sentences, and tips for citing them in MLA or another academic style, as well as how we can present our sources in a blog, creating sentence variety with different types of in-text citation strategies, and how we can develop warrants. When we think about integrating other people's words and ideas into our own writing, it's important to think about how we are maintaining our voice as authors. Sometimes it's really appropriate to present the voice of another speaker and analyze that for our readers. So what I'm talking about today are situations where you are not analyzing another text. Instead, what you're doing is going out and finding what people are saying and the words that they're writing to support your own claim, your own voice. So the focus is on evidence that you're incorporating into your text. So what are some pros when you're thinking about a summary where you're taking a big idea and putting it into a sentence or two? What was that movie about? Right, we want a 1 or 2 sentence summary of what happened, what meaning we took from it. We don't want a blow by blow, right? We don't want to go through the whole script. What they can do for you is clarify why the source material is being used. If you say, these researchers are saying this for this reason, it can distill that for your audience rather than maybe putting in a big, huge paragraph from that research study and your readers not quite understanding what it is you want them to take from it. Integrating a summary and short quotations into your own sentences can help integrate the other ideas, especially if you're like, hey, I think this, and what? These 5 people back me up. They agree that this would be a good idea. So you kind of keep the focus on what message you're sending to your readers. They also demonstrate your understanding of the source material. If you can go in and pull out a very small, appropriate quotation for what you're saying, or you can watch a 2-hour movie and distill it into 2 sentences, your readers know that, okay, this person understands what they have learned from this other person. So in a way, you're teaching to other people what you've learned. And using shorter summaries and quotations as you are discussing evidence that backs up what you have to say can help preserve your own voice so that you're not constantly shifting to other people's sounds. Rather than maybe a patchwork quilt, it feels like a well-knitted blanket where everything is unified and pulled together very well. Some cons. When might you want to be watching for not using summary or short quotations in your writing? Maybe short quotes could break up a longer text. Maybe you need that full paragraph from the source to kind of pull in that knowledge and then be able to discuss it, and breaking it up into smaller pieces might be harder for your audience to understand. Summary would not be appropriate in a situation where you're looking at the way somebody said something and talking about that. You'd want to present, maybe you're thinking about a president's speech. You'd want to pull out those 3 or 4 sentences that that person said so that you can talk about how the language being used is having a particular effect on the American people. So summary wouldn't quite be as appropriate there. Or maybe for a project you're analyzing a song lyric or something like that, summarizing what the singer said maybe would not be as effective as presenting what the quote is. So what's a quote sandwich? This is a visual aid that really helps me out as a writer and also as a reader, especially as a writing coach or guide. It helps me think about when I'm reading other people's writing, how their ideas are fitting together to give me a bigger picture, right? The different puzzle pieces. So a quote sandwich is this. It takes at least three things, right? And if you look here, I've presented a bun. Right? We have the top bun, we have the middle, and you can imagine whatever it is that you like to eat best there in that little green patty area. And then there's the bottom bun. And when we're kind of reading through a paragraph or a couple of sentences in a paragraph, we want to think about how are we introducing the quote? Right? How are we integrating that quote or summary into our paragraph? And then are we explaining why we just shared this information with our readers? We want to be really careful about taking quotes and just saying, okay, look what I found. Bang, 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 right? Because as a reader, I'm like, okay, that's great. Why that order? Why those things? So making sure we're explaining why we just shared, why the information is significant, or how it helps us understand something is going to teach our readers our thinking. Here's an example of a quote sandwich in play. So we have our top bun with the green text. Our evidence is black in the middle. That's coming from our source. And then the bottom there in green is our bottom bun. So we're introducing the quote, integrating it, and then explaining why. So I'm going to read this since it may not be easy to do on your screen. Understanding effective ways to integrate sources is important for student success, so I plan to focus on developing materials designed to help. Researchers with the Writing Institute, Green and Shu, suggest, quote, students respond best to hands-on practice, end quote. And Smith et al. Have found that, quote, interactive inquiry-focused activities are successful, end quote, in the student population they worked with at a Midwestern writing center. The time I spend on developing course materials that encourage students to practice source integration seem worth it. Students will be prepared to execute techniques effectively in their essays. So I've introduced, right? I'm giving you why I'm about to tell you this information. Here's the information, and here's why this is connected to my thesis or the main points that I have in my paragraph. So again, same thing works with summary. We're introducing the summary, integrating the summary, and explaining why the summary connects to the point that we're making. Right? Here, it's the same paragraph, but instead what I've done is rather than giving you quotes, I've given you what these two different research studies are saying in my own words. So even though it may be a little repetitive, I'm going to read it again so you can kind of get a sense of what's it like with the quotes versus what's it like in my own words as a reader. Understanding effective ways to integrate sources is important for student success, so I plan to focus on developing materials designed to help. Researchers with the Writing Institute, Green and Shu, discovered students achieve goals when they practice skills in low-stakes situations. And when Smith et al. Studied a student population at a Midwestern writing center, that activities engage students and get them asking questions worked best. The time I spend on developing course materials that encourage students to practice source integration seem worth it. Students will be prepared to execute techniques effectively in their essays. So those are two different styles. And again, they're kind of taking in smaller bits of information. Exactly what was the one thing I learned from my source to help me communicate my point to readers. There are a lot of different ways that you can do that in your own writing so that each paragraph, every time you're presenting a source in your writing, it feels fresh and new. You have a lot of different tools in your toolbox to use. These examples can integrate MLA or other types of academic sources, keywords in the sentence or in a parenthetical citation. You can also share that author, title, or source in the sentence with a hyperlink while blogging. You can include credibility facts about the source to give people a little bit of information about where the evidence is coming from. Often you want to do that maybe the first time you use a source so that we kind of know, oh, Smith et al., that's who these people are. And then we might present something new or just stop talking about what the source is because, hey, reader, you've been paying attention. Using varied sentence patterns can help, and we're going to be exploring different ways that we can do this and different types of patterns in class throughout the term. You can mix up your choices in paragraphs and also go back and forth between summary and quotation techniques so you're not doing the same thing all the time. And remember, you can excerpt quotes. You can take a big paragraph and pull out the one sentence that's most meaningful, as long as you don't change the meaning. So you want to be careful. If I pull this out of context, I can make it be whatever I want it to be. You want to make sure that it is true to the original source, because your readers will notice if they're like, that doesn't sound what Smith et al. Would say, and they go back and check. So here are 3 different ways to present the information that I've already shared with you. If you take a look at the screen, I'm taking those 2 different pieces of information from Green and Shu and from Smith et al. And et al. Is Latin for essentially like, and all those other writers. And we're using et al. Whenever, for most academic citation styles, certainly in MLA, whenever we have more than 4 authors. So when you see that, that's what that means, in case it's something that might be new to you, or you just needed a memory because it's been a while. So the very first sentence, let's take a look at that. Researchers with the Writing Institute suggest. So I'm leading with credentials. You may not be familiar with the Writing Institute, but that's an organization that you could go choose to find out, or it kind of gives you a sense that where I'm getting the information for this is coming from a place that studies writing at the least. It lets you know that these are researchers, not bloggers, not maybe podcasters. They're not movie stars. So just that little bit of information helps give you information about my sources as you're starting to read. I have a quote, students respond best to hands-on practice. That was a part of their finding. It came from the conclusion when they were talking about their the results of their study. And that's always a nice place to go to find a summary of what their main points are when you're taking a look at trying to identify what to include in your own writing. And Smith et al. Have found that, quote, interactive inquiry-focused activities are successful. So again, kind of going to their conclusions and pulling out that one sentence that makes the most sense for my paragraph. And I also wanted to let you know that those interactive inquiry-focused activities were successful in a Midwestern Writers Center. So this was at a center and a university in the Midwest and done with students, so that you kind of have a sense of the population the study was done on. And then if you look, the next sentence starts with who the researchers were, and then talked about where they were from, and then presented the quote. Here, I've broken these sentences up into 2 different sentences. Sometimes when we start to get complicated with providing information to readers, we can simplify with the amount of information we put in each sentence. It also provides some variety. And then down at the bottom, I flipped around the order that I was going to share, giving you an idea of who were these people being studied, what did they find, and then what the other study found, kind of thinking about what's the best order for my readers to get the information in, even though I might not have read the sources in that order, if that makes sense. This is what it could look like in a blogging situation where I am putting in hyperlinks to get you to the articles, and also where I am trying to get all of the information into my sentence because I don't have a keyword in text that leads you specifically to a works cited or reference or resource page down at the bottom, or a footnote. So here you can see some different sentence patterns They're similar to the ones that we're using the MLA as an example. And so here I'm sharing the title and assessing student writing. Green and Chu with the Writing Institute suggest, quote, students respond best to hand-on practice, end quote. And UMA researchers, Smith et al. Found, quote, in inquiry-focused activities, ... Now I put that ... there because this was a crazy long title. And when I put that ... or the ellipse, I let my readers know that I have removed some information from that title. So if you clicked on it and you went to the original source, it would present the entire title there. So if you take a moment to skim through, I'm using those same strategies that I did when I was presenting it in MLA. So as you are figuring out how you like to present source material in your sentences, and you're playing around with all of the different parts of the sentence, providing descriptive information at the beginning before your subject, or in between your subject and verb, or between your verb and your direct object, or at the end of the sentence. We will talk about slots, people, and how you can put information into sentences for sure throughout the term. But this gives you options so that every single time you put in a quote or you use summary, it's not the exact same. And in practicing those different strategies, you're going to find that you have a wealth of tools that you can use in any type of writing situation. And that variety is going to help engage your readers. So not only can sentences that are stacked into the shape of a sandwich, or at least visually in our brains, those can be stacked to create, paragraphs that have a lot of different points. And you can also think about your paragraphs having CEW, where you start with your topic sentence, your claim, then you present evidence in smaller, like little mini sandwiches, and then you end your paragraph with a warrant or a why, right? Right? You hear that on your apartment door. Whoa, right? Oftentimes that sharp knocking could be the sound of the police. And if they open the door and they say, where we need to come in and search your property, you might say, wait, what? Do you have a warrant? So this is the same type of thing. When we hear that on the police shows, that warrant is a list or reasons why the cops have given the judge so that they can come in to the property and check things out. The warrant in your writing does the same thing, where you say, hey, look, here's this list of stuff, and this is why all of these pieces of evidence and all of these things I think should result in the outcome, the conclusion. So looking ahead, we are going to be paying attention to how we are weaving sources and evidence into our discussion in our blog and preparing for that research paper later on in the term. We also want to be mindful of what information we're providing our readers when we talk about sources, and becoming comfortable with giving them little bits of information here and there so that they kind of know what our sources are and why we have selected them for the particular piece that we're writing. We can do that in a really kind of warm conversational way, so they get done, they're like, wow, right, that was not only a well thought out whatever it was, but it also is based on some pretty solid research. And so we want to be thinking about how we're communicating that throughout our writing. We're also going to be thinking about different ways to use sources to back up what we have to say. So I'm really excited about what's to come, especially as we start to dive into primary sources and also learn how we can follow those source trails when we hit the library and explore sources there as well. I look forward to your next post. Please get in touch if you have questions ever about how to cite sources, because every time you sit down to write a new blog post, you're trying something new, and I encourage you to explore. Thanks.